The air was thick with excitement and the tangy scent of gasoline as the annual Lakewood Motorcycle Show kicked off. Sunlight gleamed off chrome and steel as hundreds of custom bikes lined the exhibition grounds, their proud owners chatting animatedly with attendees. The sound of revving engines and lively music formed a symphony of adrenaline, drawing enthusiasts from across the state. Amid the vibrant chaos, a group of soldiers arrived at the main gate. Their entrance was subtle, yet commanding. Dressed casually, their posture and camaraderie betrayed their military roots. Each of their custom motorcycles, however, screamed precision and craftsmanship. The bikes, painted in sleek shades of black, silver, and deep navy, gleamed with intricate designs that paid homage to their service. One bike featured an eagle clutching a tattered American flag. Another displayed the silhouette of a soldier saluting beneath a crimson sunset. Each ride was as much a piece of art as it was a machine built for speed. Sergeant Mike, the group's unofficial leader, stood tall as he removed his helmet, revealing a face weathered by years of service, but softened by a warm, approachable smile. His bike, a modified Ducati Panigale, bore the group's insignia, a simple yet powerful crest symbolizing unity and resilience. "All right, team," Mike said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Let's show these folks what real craftsmanship looks like." The soldiers parked their bikes in the exhibition area and were immediately surrounded by a curious and admiring crowd. Families, fellow riders, and photographers snapped pictures of the bikes, asking the soldiers about their designs and the stories behind them. "Is this a military bike?" a young boy asked, his eyes wide as he touched the polished handlebars of a soldier's Harley-Davidson. "It's a tribute," replied Corporal Jake, crouching down to the boy's level. "Every detail on here has a story. See that emblem? That's for a buddy of mine who didn't make it back. Every time I ride, it feels like he's with me." The boy's father gave Jake a respectful nod. "Thank you for your service." Meanwhile, a different vibe simmered across the lot. Rusty, the leader of a notorious local biker gang, leaned against his battered chopper. His bike, a mishmash of duct tape panels and mismatched paint, stood in stark contrast to the soldiers' immaculate machines. Rusty's gang of 5 was equally rough around the edges, their leather jackets emblazoned with a snarling wolf insignia. Rusty's scowl deepened as he noticed the crowd's attention shifting entirely to the soldiers. His gang's bikes, usually a source of intimidation and pride, suddenly seemed laughable. "What's so great about their bikes?" Rusty sneered, loud enough for his gang to hear. "All flash, no soul," a gang member chuckled. "Bet they can't even handle those fancy machines on the road." Rusty's smirk widened. "Maybe we should go say hello." The gang sauntered over, their boots crunching on the gravel. The once friendly atmosphere grew tense as Rusty stopped a few feet from Mike, his arms crossed. "Nice toys," Rusty said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did they come with training wheels, or did you have to buy those separately?" Mike turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "Just here to enjoy the show like everyone else," he replied evenly. Rusty chuckled. "Yeah, enjoy it while you can. Looks like your shiny bikes are stealing all the attention. But let me tell you something, pretty boy. Real bikers don't need all that chrome and paint to prove themselves." Mike's team exchanged glances, but said nothing. The soldiers had been trained to stay calm under pressure, and this situation was no different. Rusty, however, wasn't finished. "You military types think you're better than everyone else. Let me guess. These bikes are just for show. Bet you couldn't handle a real ride if your life depended on it." Jake stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We're not looking for trouble, man. Walk away." Rusty's grin turned menacing. "Or what? You gonna call for backup, soldier boy?" Before the situation could escalate, Mike raised a hand, signaling his team to stay back. He locked eyes with Rusty. "We're here to have a good time, same as you. Let's not ruin it for everyone else." For a moment, Rusty seemed to consider backing down, but the smug expression on his face suggested otherwise. "Enjoy your spotlight while it lasts," he muttered before turning and walking away, his gang trailing behind him. The soldiers exhaled collectively, the tension dissipating as quickly as it had arisen. "Think they'll cause more trouble?" one soldier asked. Mike shrugged. "If they do, we'll handle it. But for now, let's focus on why we're here." The group returned to the crowd, their presence once again a source of admiration and respect. The afternoon wore on, the motorcycle show reaching its peak. Attendees filled the lot, marveling at the variety of bikes on display. Food trucks wafted enticing smells of barbecue and fried treats, while live music created an upbeat backdrop. The soldiers enjoyed the event, answering questions and even participating in a timed race that showcased their bikes' speed and agility. However, Rusty and his gang lurked in the background, their resentment festering. Rusty, nursing his bruised ego, couldn't stand the sight of the soldiers being praised. "They think they're so special," he muttered, lighting a cigarette. "Let's see how special they are when we knock them off their high horses." One of the gang members, a wiry man named Lou, smirked. "What's the plan, boss?" Rusty grinned wickedly. "Follow my lead." The gang approached the soldiers again, this time with more swagger. Rusty walked right up to Mike, blowing a puff of smoke into the air. "Hey, soldier boy," Rusty called out, loud enough to draw the attention of nearby attendees. "Heard you're all military. That true?" Mike turned, his expression neutral. "That's right," Rusty laughed, a harsh and mocking sound. "Figures. You're probably not even real soldiers, just a bunch of weekend warriors playing dress-up." Jake bristled. "You don't know anything about us." Rusty stepped closer, his tone condescending. "Oh, I know plenty. Guys like you think wearing a uniform makes you better than everyone else. But out here, that uniform means nothing. Out here, it's all about who's tougher." Mike's team exchanged uneasy glances. The crowd, sensing the rising tension, began to gather around. Rusty continued, his voice growing louder. "You wouldn't last a day in the real military or on the real road. Bet you don't even know how to fight without your fancy training." Mike, ever calm, held his ground. "We're not looking for a fight." Rusty smirked. "That's what I thought. All bark, no bite." One of the gang members, emboldened by Rusty's words, suddenly stepped forward and swung a fist at Mike. The sergeant dodged effortlessly, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back in one swift motion. The gang member cried out in pain, dropping to his knees. Mike released him and took a step back, his voice firm. "Walk away, now." Rusty's face turned red with anger. He glanced at his gang, then at the crowd, which had fallen silent. "You'll regret that," Rusty growled, storming off with his gang in tow. As the soldiers regrouped, Jake turned to Mike. "You think they'll come back?" Mike nodded grimly. "Probably. Let's stay sharp." The show continued, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud. The soldiers knew they had made enemies, and the day was far from over. The air at the motorcycle show grew heavy with tension, the once joyful atmosphere now replaced by hushed murmurs and nervous glances. Rusty's humiliation was palpable, his flushed face betraying his rage. As Mike and his team began to step away, Rusty's gang crowded around him, feeding his anger. "Are we going to let them show us up like that?" Rusty growled, his voice carrying over the sound of idling engines and the crowd's murmurs. His gang, eager to redeem themselves, nodded in unison. The first punch came from one of Rusty's men, a burly biker with tattoos snaking up his arms. He lunged at Mike, aiming to catch him off guard. But Mike, ever composed, sidestepped the attack with precision, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back in one fluid motion. "Stand down," Mike said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "You don't want to do this." But the gang wasn't interested in reason. Another biker charged, swinging wildly at Corporal Jackson. Jackson ducked, then delivered a swift elbow to the man's stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Looks like it's on," Jackson muttered, rolling his shoulders. The gang attacked en masse, a chaotic blur of fists and fury. But the soldiers were a wall of discipline and skill, their movements precise and controlled. Corporal Reyes blocked a punch, then countered with a knee strike that left his opponent gasping for air. Private Winters ducked a swing and retaliated with a calculated sweep of his leg, sending another gang member crashing to the ground. The crowd roared, some cheering for the soldiers, others filming the spectacle on their phones. A few concerned onlookers dialed the police, their voices trembling as they reported the escalating fight. Rusty, watching his gang falter, grew desperate. His pride was on the line, and he refused to be outdone. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife, the blade gleaming ominously under the afternoon sun. "Mike, watch your back," Winters shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Mike turned just in time to see Rusty lunging at him, the knife aimed for his ribs. With a calmness that belied the danger, Mike deflected the attack, grabbing Rusty's wrist and twisting it until the knife clattered to the ground. "You don't want to do this," Mike said, his tone even but firm. Rusty snarled, his free hand swinging wildly. Mike blocked the blow, and with a calculated maneuver, twisted Rusty's arm until a sickening crack echoed through the air. Rusty screamed, dropping to his knees as the knife lay forgotten on the ground. The gang froze, their morale shattered. One by one, they backed away, some clutching bruised ribs, others nursing split lips and black eyes. The soldiers stood firm, their composure unbroken, as the crowd erupted into cheers and applause. "We didn't come here for a fight," Jackson said, addressing the crowd, "but we're not about to let anyone push us around." Rusty, cradling his broken arm, glared up at Mike, his eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed through gritted teeth. Mike didn't respond. He simply stood tall, his presence commanding respect, as the sound of distant sirens grew louder. The piercing wail of sirens cut through the air, signaling the arrival of law enforcement. The crowd parted as 3 police cars screeched to a halt, their lights flashing in a blur of red and blue. Officers poured out, guns drawn, their faces taut with tension. "Hands up! Everyone, on the ground!" one officer barked, his voice amplified by the chaos. The soldiers raised their hands, their movements deliberate and calm, while the battered bikers hesitated, their defiance wavering. The officers scanned the scene, their eyes darting between the sprawled bodies, the injured, and the crowd of onlookers. "Officer, let me explain," a bystander said, stepping forward with their phone. "These guys," they pointed at Rusty and his gang, "started the whole thing. The soldiers were just defending themselves." Other witnesses chimed in, their voices overlapping as they described the events. Several held up their phones, playing videos that clearly showed Rusty and his gang instigating the confrontation. An officer approached Mike, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. "You the leader here?" he asked, his tone cautious. Mike nodded. "Sergeant Michael Carter, U.S. Army. My team and I were here for the show. These guys," he gestured toward Rusty's gang, "came looking for trouble." The officer studied Mike for a moment before nodding. "We'll sort this out." Rusty, still clutching his arm, snarled, "They attacked us. Look at what they did." Another officer, reviewing a bystander's video, shook his head. "Not what the footage shows, pal. You and your crew threw the first punch." The officer turned to Rusty. "You're under arrest for assault, attempted murder, and disturbing the peace." Rusty's gang protested, their voices rising in anger, but the police silenced them with stern warnings. One by one, the bikers were handcuffed and led to the waiting squad cars, their bravado replaced by sullen silence. As Rusty was hauled to his feet, he glared at Mike. "This isn't over," he spat. Mike met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes, it is." The officer who had spoken to Mike earlier approached him again. "I appreciate your cooperation, Sergeant Carter. Looks like you and your team handled yourselves well." "We didn't want it to come to this," Mike replied, "but we won't back down when pushed." The officer extended a hand. "Thank you for your service, and for keeping things from getting worse." Mike shook his hand, nodding. "Just doing what we were trained to do." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause echoing across the showgrounds. The soldiers, though modest, couldn't help but smile at the support. As the police wrapped up their investigation, the soldiers prepared to leave. They mounted their motorcycles, the engines roaring to life as the crowd parted to let them through. "Let's ride," Jackson said, his voice carrying a hint of relief. The soldiers rode out, their heads held high, leaving behind a scene of justice and accountability. Rusty and his gang, now subdued and facing the consequences of their actions, watched in silence as the soldiers disappeared into the distance. For the crowd, the day's events would become legend, a tale of discipline triumphing over chaos, of integrity standing firm against arrogance. And for the soldiers, it was a reminder of who they were and what they stood for. A brotherhood built on respect, honor, and the unyielding resolve to do what was right. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of courage, discipline, and justice. Today's story serves as a reminder that standing strong in the face of aggression can inspire respect and restore balance. If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to stay updated on more incredible stories that uplift, challenge, and inspire. And as always, let us know where you're listening from. We love connecting with our amazing community across the globe. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and never stop fighting for what's right.